Президент Российской Федерации
President of the Russian Federation, Mr. Vladimir Putin, President of the Republic of Kazakhstan, Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, and President of the Republic of Mongolia, Khurelsukh. The moderator of the plenary session is Mr. Sergei Brylov.
Добрый день, Kassym-Jomart Kemelyevich. Добрый день, господин Khurelsukh.
Good afternoon, Mr. Tokayev and Mr. Khurelsukh and President Putin. There will be official speeches now. And I've been walking around and I made sure that you are not Ms. Merkel. What? You're not Angela Merkel. And, well, it was not that difficult to notice it. And I have a mobile phone, unlike you. What about you? Do you have it? You do not have it since the time of St. Petersburg? Not even then? No. I have a mobile phone, and it reminded me of a certain thing. Some 8 years ago, I had my first interview with you, and it was in the taiga of Ussurisk, and I got carried away, and I like the Far East, and I was at Hassan, Turup, the Zvezda, Komsomolsk, on the Amur, and the problem is that whenever you come, they tell us, well, Putin was over here, let's follow his route, and there will be a talk, and let's address to the citizens of the Far East. Why are you coming back? What makes you coming back to them? And the citizens of the Far East, both the previous generations and those living now, are pioneers. They're living at the frontier. You have to imagine what kind of work will have to be pulled through to master these territories, to develop these territories. Could you imagine what large scale the work is, and you had to demonstrate the qualities, your courage and enthusiasm, and the current generations are the pioneers as well, because many things that are happening over here are being done here for the first time, and the spirit of the pioneers, those who are the front leaders and make things happen, is an intrinsic feature of people living here, and it is very important. The development of this region is very important for this country. It is very promising for this country, for Russia, for decades ahead and for the hundreds of years, complemented with the Arctic, and it is considered to be part of these territories. We tend to understand why we pay so much attention to these areas. Arctic accounts for 18% of the mineral resources, and it is the mineral resources of not only of Russia, but the mineral resources of the whole world. And that's why we should act in the business-like manner when working here. That's why Russia is focusing on the development of these territories. Let's agree on the format of the discussions. There will be official talks, and I would like to give the floor to the presidents of Kazakhstan and Mongolia. But first, I would like to give the floor to President Putin of the Russian Federation.
Thank you, distinguished Mr. Kassym-Jomart Kemelyevich. We have just had an opportunity to talk at the beginning of a major joint project between state authorities of Kazakhstan and Sberbank, the group of Sberbank. And I would like to once again thank you, Mr. President, for the decision to opt for the Russian partner distinguished Mr. Kassym-Jomart, distinguished Mr. Ukhnaagiin, Khurelsukh, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. I welcome all the participants and guests of the Eastern Economic Forum. After a forced hiatus due to the pandemic, Vladivostok once again hosts company executives, entrepreneurs, experts from dozens of countries of the world. I am glad that our invitation has been accepted by the presidents of Kazakhstan and Mongolia. They are participating in the plenary session through video teleconference, as you can see now. Greetings to the forum were also sent by leaders of China, India, and Thailand. Such wide representation, interest towards developing the Russian Far East, show that the economy is recovering, that it is going back to business as usual, and Russia is open for mutually beneficial partnerships with all the countries of the Asia-Pacific region. I would like to note that the APR, which accounts for a third of world GDP, has for many years been a driver of global economy. Everyone knows it very well. Rates of development shown by the countries of the region consistently surpass the global average. Russia, and here I would like to emphasize that it is natural, but I would like to underscore it. Yet again, Russia is an integral part of the APR, and we will be creating our Far Eastern regions a powerful center of attraction for investment and new economy. Create spaces of opportunity for citizens to implement their most daring business ideas. I would like to emphasize that despite the complicated situation caused by the pandemic and its economic consequences, we did not give up, but on the contrary, we sought to speed up the rates of implementation of long-term plans for developing the Far East. Today, I would like to tell you about some of the current results of this work. At least I would like to start with it. About the decisions that we have already made or that we intend to make to strengthen economy and the social sector of the region. Over the last 60 years, the amount of accumulated direct foreign investment in the Far East almost doubled and reached $80 billion. The industry of the region over those years grew at a rate higher than the Russian average. The industrial growth amounted to 20%, which is the double of the national average. Thanks to new investment support special mechanisms, over 2,500 residents have registered in the advanced special economy zones and the free port of Vladivostok. 68,000 new jobs were created. In the Far East of the Russian Federation, in such subjects as the Amur region, the Khabarovsk territory, Primorye, projects of world impact have been launched in aircraft and shipbuilding, in chemical industry, gas processing, logistics. I would like to underscore this, esteemed colleagues. This diversity of the regional economy is something that inspires us to achieve new goals in these directions. We have well-developed aviation here, both military and civil, shipbuilding after the Soviet period have been in decline, but now it is being revitalized. On a new technological base, new products are being created. Long-term plans are underway. Chemical industry is also being developed. I'm not even talking about gas processing. I believe that everyone knows about those projects. It all happens in the Far East. In certain regions, different projects are being implemented. In Chukotka and Transbaikal, major ore and metal fields are being exploited. I would like to commend the work of managing companies on the ground to improve the business climate. A lot has been done here, and I would like to express my appreciation to the heads of regions in the Far East. In 2020, four Far Eastern subjects of the Russian Federation made it to the top 30 in the National Investment Climate Ranking. I hope that their numbers will continue to grow in the future. In 2017, there were no such regions in the top 30 at all. We steadily strengthen guarantees and expands business opportunity across Russia. We are well aware of the need to constantly propose new, more sophisticated solutions, especially for the Far East, which is tasked with advanced development at a rate higher than the Russian average. And here, we must create competitive conditions for the work of our partners. It means that tax burden criteria, cost of debt, speed and quality of public services for business should be globally competitive, as I have just mentioned. The best, not just better, but they have to be the best in the whole Asia-Pacific region. It is a very hard task, but it is something that we have to seek. It is precisely this essential unprecedented package of privileges that we are going to create in the Kuril Islands, where we will fully exempt business from key taxes on profit, property, land, and transport for a period of 10 years. I would like to emphasize, for this to apply, it is not enough for the company to be simply registered on the Kuril Islands. It has to be working there, building, opening enterprises, hiring employees. Eligible companies will also be entitled to lower insurance fees, 7.6% for a period to 10 years as well. Across the Kuril Islands, a duty-free zone regime will be in effect. It means that importing goods, equipment, and exporting end products will be simpler and easier. Within this zone, VAT will not be levied until the merchandise leaves the territory of the islands. I would like to be clear from the start, this preferential regime will not apply to all types of activities, agency work, manufacture of excisable goods, hydrocarbon production and processing, as well as valuable sea bioresources fishery will be the exception. And it is quite obvious because these types of activities are already an activity that is very profitable. And I would like to emphasize that tax, customs, administrative advantages are something that not only national companies but also foreign investors will be able to make use of, including, naturally, our neighbors, including our Japanese partners. We have discussed it with them earlier in terms of creating conditions to develop the economy of those islands and possibilities for cooperation there. Taking this opportunity, I would like to digress a little. This year, Japan hosted the Summer Olympic Games. In a few years, the Paralympic Games will be ending. I would like to congratulate the organizing committee, executives, and citizens of Japan with some of the heads and organizers. I am well acquainted. I would like to congratulate them all on being able, in difficult times, to successfully hold such a high-level event, create the necessary conditions for athletes to compete. But back to our original topic, we hope that this preferential regime on the Kurils will yield tangible results for the development of the islands and for launching promising projects. First and foremost in such fields as tourism, sea farming, fish processing. For Russia and naturally for our citizens living in the Far East, it is important that centers of economic growth with large export potential be created in the area. It means new jobs, an increase in personal income, development of small and medium-sized enterprises. Railways and roads, seaports of the Far East today service a considerable part of Russia's international trade. We work on expanding their capabilities, on developing a trunk infrastructure. First and foremost, we increase the traffic capacity of Baikal-Amur mainline and the Trans-Siberian Railway. We have talked about it a lot, and a lot is being done, but we need to do even more. I would like to go into more detail on the matter of Baikal-Amur mainline. Our country has taken up this project several times. Back in the first half of the 20th century, research was conducted and parts of the railway were constructed. However, it was in 1974, almost 50 years ago, that full-scale constructions began. We will make sure to duly celebrate the 50th anniversary since the beginning of the construction of Baikal-Amur mainline. And today I would like to express my appreciation to veterans of the construction who, in harsh weather conditions, made it through the taiga through mountain chains to build this necessary and even more indispensable traffic artery for our country. Dear friends, you laid down a solid foundation, and today our task is to put into practice plans to modernize the main line, to develop the whole eastern polygon of railways, meeting the outlined deadlines and the announced parameters. I hope that we will be able to live up to this promise. I would like to note that rail traffic and transshipment in Russian ports are on the rise. This means export revenues and budget revenues. It also means additional resources, which we primarily use to solve the social problems faced by our citizens. But we cannot forget about trade-offs either, about environmental risks, about coal dust, for example, such a simple thing, but people can feel it. It is not an inconsequential detail. People can feel it, and they are justified in their complaints. We have already made several decisions in this regard. Inter alia, agreements have been signed with stevedoring companies. They stipulate that Russian ports should be equipped with environment-friendly, best available technologies for cargo transshipment. Such technologies are being in use in Russia, and they are more and more widely used across the regions. And I hope that in the Far East it will be something that is introduced at a good rate. I believe that we should go even further and codify such requirements at the legislative level so that Russia's cargo ports, not only Nakhodka, Vladivostok, but also Murmansk, Kaliningrad, Novorossiysk, and others, were equipped with continuous environment monitoring systems. There is another pressing area-specific problem in the Far East. It is the shortage of construction materials. Many of those materials have to be brought from hundreds or even thousands of kilometers away. This naturally directly affects the rate and cost of the projects, not only in infrastructure, but also on the housing market. In the nearest future, we need to increase manifold construction material manufacturing in the Far East. Inter alia, we will create a modern cluster for this industry in the Khabarovsk territory, which has all the necessary resources, production capacities, and personnel for this task. I would like to emphasize that this cluster will serve the needs of the Far East in its entirety, and I ask the government of the Russian Federation, together with our leading companies, Russian Railways, Rosavtodrom, and other major consumers of construction materials, to draw up a proposal on the matter. This work is already being done, but this proposal should be finalized as soon as possible. These modern material resources, technologies that meet the highest environmental standards will be the ones that we use to develop the potential of the Far East, a most important part of global transport corridors. We will also build up the capabilities of the Northern Sea Route. I would like to note that over the last 10 years, the volume of cargo shipping through this route increased tenfold. Not to be mistaken, in 1986, around 7 million tons, and by 24, there should be 80 million tons to be shipped there. And I'm sure that these figures are not something that we cannot surpass. I have met with my colleagues at the sessions as part of the forum, and a suggestion has been put forward to launch along the Northern Sea Line a container line serving as a regular all-year shipping lane. I have already explained my position, and I will reiterate it. It is important to analyze and assess the prospects of such a transport corridor. It is very important. We should do it, and we will do it. But first, we need to work out all the technological issues. We need an infrastructure, ensure security, and so on and so forth. But this, undoubtedly, is the future for shipping from Asia to Europe and on the way back. We need to analyze the possibility of starting regular passages to ship cargo between Vladivostok and St. Petersburg as soon as next year in order to test out the route and form and establish the cargo base. Distinguished colleagues, the strategic vector of developing the Far East is the new economy. Those economic, scientific, and technological development directions that define the future, set long-term development trends. in entire fields, countries, and regions of the world. And here, a whole new range of opportunities opens up for international cooperation. Opportunities to see the development of traditional economy, fields and sectors in a new light. For the Far East, with its vast territories, remote populated areas, the matter of reliable, environment-friendly energy sources, including autonomous ones, is highly important. Such projects are already being implemented. For example, in Chukotka, the academic Lomonosov floating nuclear cogeneration plant is operating. In Buryatia, the Tereyskaya solar power plant with a capacity of 90 megawatts has been launched. In Nakhodka and the Amur region, there are plans to produce methanol, which can be used not only as feedstock for chemical production, but also as next-generation fuel, primarily in sea shipping. I ask the government, along with regional authorities, to do their utmost to assist in implementing those projects. With modern technology and with an eye towards the appearance and development of new markets, we need to use the energy potential of Far Eastern seas. One of such projects can be the construction of the Tugur tidal power station in the southern part of the Sea of Okhotsk. Along with other industrial projects, here in the Far East, we can create a powerful industrial cluster to produce green hydrogen and ammonia, demand for which, for decades to come, will steadily grow, particularly here in the Asia-Pacific region. Naturally, to implement those plans, it is necessary to embrace and introduce breakthrough technological decisions in transport, energy, and other fields. This is a serious challenge for our economy and science. I charge the government with analyzing all the aspects of creating in the Far East a center for green hydrogen ammonia production, including a technical and economic feasibility study of such a project, as well as participation of foreign partners, first and foremost from Japan and China. We all, and these countries are leading economies of the world, and we all make big commitments to preserve our nature. I would like to know that such projects are in line with global and Russian climate goals. And in this context, I would like to turn to climate projects that we intend to actively promote in the Far East. Sakhalin region, as is already known, but I will say it, the Sakhalin region will soon become a platform for a pilot project that will allow us region-wide to work out issues related to emission control and greenhouse gases absorption. As part of the experiment, major organizations will submit carbon reports reflect the results of their climate projects. The goal that we set is quite concrete. By 2026, Sakhalin should achieve carbon neutrality. It means that the amount emitted should be equal to the amount absorbed. I would like to remind that by the 1st of July next year, the government should prepare the complete regulatory framework for implementing in Russia climate projects and using carbon units. This must be done in accordance with international standards. We will discuss the workflow with the government separately in the nearest future. I believe that in October we will be able to do it. Here, I propose to think about extending the experiment on green gas emission control to other regions of Russia. I know that some of them have already shown interest. What else can I add here? The Arctic region has great influence over the global climate. We need to understand and predict the processes at work here, and for that we need a solid foundation, precise scientific data. In this regard, I ask to speed up the creation of a national permafrost monitoring system, finalize the regulatory framework for its launch by the end of next year. Right now, Russia is presiding over the Arctic Council. As an important initiative, under our chairmanship, we propose to organize an international expedition to the high latitudes in the Arctic. The base of the expedition will be the North Pole drifting research station fitted with all the necessary equipment. The station itself will be located on a unique ice-resistant platform. Right now, it is under construction in St. Petersburg, and it will be put into service in the closest months. Distinguished colleagues, dear friends, the purpose, value, and significance of all our plans that we intend to implement here have less to do with exploiting natural riches than with attracting investments and technologies, but first and foremost, it is about ensuring that people in the Far East can live comfortably, to ensure that they can make use of their knowledge and talents, start a family, build a house, raise their children. I would like to note that since 2019, in the Far East, a special demographic package has been in effect. It includes an increased maternity capital, lump sum payments for the birth of a second child, and for families with 3 or more children, a monthly payment is also provided. These are special measures to support the people who are living here. These measures yield results. Today, the birth rate in the Far East is higher than the Russian average. However, when it comes to the population dynamics, we see that challenges unfortunately still remain. Yesterday, at a meeting with colleagues, we also discussed this matter. We need to fundamentally change the situation, achieve sustainable, positive population dynamics in the Far East. And the key element here is, of course, improving the quality of life. I would like to remind that by 2024, every Far Eastern subject of the Russian Federation should have a quality of life that is no lower than the national average. It is a complex and difficult task which requires systemic work. First and foremost, I'm talking about healthcare. Doctors of Far Eastern hospitals, outpatients clinics, rural health posts do a good job and work hard, but it is obvious that there are problems that cannot be solved through formal, averaged, and generalized formulas and approaches. We need to bear in mind the specific characteristics of the region. Right now, I will not go into detail about the matters that we discussed at the meeting yesterday. Undoubtedly, there is a lot to be done, but we will be working it out on other sessions, and the measures of support will be put into practice. The Far East is a vast, scarcely populated territory, and to people who live here should be provided with quality medical care. This care should be affordable and reliable. Yesterday, with colleagues from the federal government and heads of Far Eastern regions, we discussed the proposal by United Russia and made several important decisions in this regard. First, we will further increase spending on healthcare in the Far East, primarily its remote and underpopulated areas. We will earmark for that purpose an additional 6 billion rubles annually. It is but the first step. Second, it has been agreed to extend the Unified Subsidy Program. Under the program in the Far East, 476 social facilities have already built with federal funds, and 700 facilities have been repaired. We are talking about schools, kindergartens, outpatient clinics, sports centers, and rural health centers. Next year, the Far Eastern subjects of the Russian Federation for the program will receive an additional $20 billion rubles. At least half of that will be spent on developing the healthcare infrastructure. I would like to emphasize these funds will be added to the 57 billion rubles that are to be put into the program meant to modernize the primary care in the federal district. And here is another task important to the whole region. Out of 2,500 post offices operating in the Far East, 80% are located in remote, populated areas. Out of them, 3/4 require repairing and renovating. As you know, I supported the proposal made by United Russia to modernize and expand the services provided by postal offices so that our citizens could use them to get public services, remotely procure necessary goods, including food and medicine. Large-scale renovation of postal network infrastructure across Russia will begin in the nearest future. Pilot projects in the Far East start in Primorye, the Khabarovsk territory, and in Buryatia. Next, we need to create all the necessary conditions and opportunities to ensure that every resident in the Far East can gain up-to-date knowledge and qualifications, learn an in-demand trade, and find a high-paying job. I would like to remind, as proposed by United Russia, we need to launch the school major repairs program. In the next 5 years here in the Far East, we intend to repair over 1,000 school buildings. Moreover, as part of the school construction program, by the end of 2023, we will add 21,500 new student places. What else I would like to note? The number of school graduates in the Far East is growing. However, many of those graduates leave to study in other regions. Usually, it is there that they find a job, start a family, and ultimately stay. We need to increase the accessibility and quality of secondary and higher education here in the Far East. Special attention should be paid to the training of skilled personnel. In this regard, I support and propose in 2023 to hold in Khabarovsk the World Skills National Competition. I'm certain that it will give an additional impetus to developing vocational education across the whole region. When it comes to free higher education, its accessibility for Far Eastern schools graduates is still lower than the national average. This is why in the coming years we will continue to increase the number of state finance openings in Far Eastern universities. I have statistics here. I will not bore you with them, but I believe that we should change these statistics a little bit. We have to set a higher goal. At the same time, we need to improve the quality of higher education in the Far East, bring up-to-date curriculums, and upgrade research and scientific infrastructure, taking into account the needs of economy, employers, modern labor market, and high demand of the graduates themselves and students themselves. We need to attract more qualified professionals. Within the next 10 years, the Far Eastern Federal University should become one of the leading world universities. When it comes to curriculum, teaching level, and demand for its graduates, it should meet the highest international standards. What else? For young specialists and their families, and for all the citizens as a whole, is the housing matter, its quality and affordability. Since 2019, in the Far East, a special 2% mortgage program has been available for families and those who are building their home, including at a plot of land received under the Far Eastern Hectare program. Around 24,000 families have already managed to solve their housing problems with this credit. There is a proposal to expand this program through other categories and other specialists, I would like to say, that are in high demand in the Far East. In the nearest future, we will consider this proposal with the government. At the same time, I would like to note that the housing prices in the Far East over the recent years have grown. On the market, there is a lack of good quality, affordable offers. I would like to remind about the goal we set. By 2024, there should be a 1.6 increase in housing construction in the Far East compared to 2019. I ask the government, along with heads of regions, to work out what additional steps need to be taken in order to incentivize housing construction in the Far East. Adding to that, it is important to solve housing problems and quality of life issues in a holistic way. And here, the launch of the renovation program for Far Eastern cities is long overdue. I would like to emphasize we are not talking about simply giving residential areas and public spaces a new look. It is important to set the vector of long-term development for cities. Instead of concentrating around large factories and production facilities, they have to become cities where attention is focused on the person, their needs, comfortable conditions for lives and development. where there is place for new ideas, initiatives, and projects for the economy of the future, where the public transport is comfortable and environment-friendly. We should not forget about such cities as Tinda, Severodonetsk, which are very important for the development of the Baikal-Amur main line. Such programs have to be implemented with a close dialogue with its residents, and we must be responsive to their interests and requests. We must make use of the instruments and mechanisms that we have launched recently. I mean infrastructure budgetary credits, subsidized bonds of the Domorev's Institute and the Well-Being National Foundation. We also have to actively use the opportunities provided by the Public Transport Renovation Program, as well as the Far Eastern Concession Mechanism, when their city infrastructure, including the communal infrastructure, is being funded from private investors, while the state makes it its obligation to reimburse the investments. Development programs and master plans for each and every of those mentioned cities we need to prepare within the coming next 2 years. The first few are proposed to consider and approve at the next Eastern Economic Forum. Distinguished colleagues, the development of the Far East is a unique goal, a goal unique in its complexity, scale, and significance. At the same time, it is one of the most promising directions of work. For large global companies, medium-sized enterprises, beginning entrepreneurs, for young specialists, and for experienced professionals, this is a very interesting endeavor. I would like to reiterate, advanced development of the Far East is our long-term, absolute priority. It is the common responsibility and job of the government regions, all levels of authority, our largest companies, both public and private. The Far East is a region with special geography, climate, and nature. Here, they value courage and resilience. Those who live in the Far East have a special kind of character and a strength of mind, as I have said at the beginning of our meeting. They know how to set lofty goals and how to achieve them. We do our best to create in the Far East more than comfortable life conditions for people, increase the income and the well-being of the families living here. I'm convinced that we will be able to achieve those results if we act together. And I hope that you will be actively working on this track. I wish you every success. Thank you for your attention.
Mr. President, there are a lot of questions, and I will ask some of them right now. This morning, there was a Russia-Japan business dialogue, and I was pleased to hear the confirmation of many plans. We have referred to the Kuril Islands, and there was a discussion some 2 years ago related to the Kurils. And if I understand it right, the customs freedom concept includes Japan as one of the foreign partners, but Japanese are striving for more, and they've been linking the issue of the islands with the peace agreement. And since the past discussions, there was a referendum on a constitution, and there is a new provision that Russia territory is not divided, and so the Kuril Islands are part of Russia for always. Does it change the approach of Russia to cooperation with Japan? No, it does not change our approach. We are still interested in the peace agreement, and this document is a must in our relations, the more so that both Russia and Japan are interested in the normalization of the relations. I mean the mutual strategic interests in cooperation between the two countries. We've been maintaining that we have to respect the legally binding results of the Second World War, and we were never against the dialogue on peace agreement, and we come to terms with the former premier, and we agreed to build the relations based on the documents of the 60th. But our partners from Japan have been changing their stance, their position. First, we agreed that we will build the relation based on the Memorandum of 1958. More than that, both the Supreme Council, Soviet, and the Japan Parliament approved the document. Then the Japan refused to adopt it. Then they resumed it again, and then they rejected it again, and it's an internal process. Of course, we will have to take into consideration the realities of our time. One being that when we talk about the peace agreement, we should ensure peaceful future, and we should have assurances that there'll be no deployment of U.S. weaponry and missile in the proximity to Russia. We have posed those issues. We asked the questions, but we have not received the answers to the questions. So it's up to the Japan to proceed with the process. So we have been discussing on the certain implementation of the Japanese proposals, and we started the work to set up the conditions for economic and business activity. The proposals that I have expressed, these are not actually the proposals, but the plans, what we shall do about the Kuril Islands, but those are meant for the implementation of the agreements. But does that mean that the Constitution makes the declaration of 1958 void? And we should analyze the declaration and compare it with the provisions of the constitutions to make conclusions. And we continue the addresses, and the floor is given to Mr. Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, President of the Republic of Kazakhstan. Dear Vladimir Vladimirovich, dear participants of the forum, first of all, I would like to express my appreciation to President Putin for the invitation to speak at the authoritative Eastern Economic Forum, and it is the venue of dialogue on the most burning issues of economic cooperation. And the substantial talk that was delivered by President Putin is another evidence of that. The Far East has a unique potential, and it was declared a national priority for the period of the whole 21st century. And the Far East for us is not something far away, alien, and I used to live in Blagoveshchensk, Khabarovsk in the 80s, and taking part in the border negotiations with China. And it means a lot for Kazakhstan, for us as a strategic partner, because it connects Eurasia with the dynamically developing Pacific Asian, and half of the population live there, and it accounts for 2/3 of the GNP. And I am of the opinion that the Asia-Pacific is the center of the economic activity, and Kazakhstan is the largest economy of Central Asia. It aims to strengthen its presence in the region, and it reflects the essence of our work with our partners in Asia. And one of the elements of the strategy of Kazakhstan is a comprehensive cooperation with the Russian Federation, our strategic partner, ally, and the great Eurasian power. And the other countries of the mega region are important investment and trade partners. Last year, and the Asia-Pacific countries that do not taking into account the countries of Americas, a lot of money, 3.2 billion USD, were attracted, and China, the Republic of Korea, accounts for 80% of the amount. But we should not idle, and that's why I would like to indicate a number of the areas that we should make our work more vigorous. First, it is increasing the economic connectivity. And to achieve that, we have to accelerate the construction of the transportation infrastructure. Kazakhstan is a transit hub. Even last year, the transit of cargo has increased by 17%, though despite the pandemic. And it is the result of implementation of the plans of the development of the infrastructure. We started the project some 10 years ago with $30 billion allocated for the infrastructure. We have opened 5 railroad and 6 automobile roads to connect Asia and Europe. Besides, we have refurbished Aktau port and built another one in the Caspian Sea. And we should emphasized the cohesion of our plans with the activity of the Eurasian Economic Union and the activity of China on the other side. And there is a synergy to develop the continental transportation systems. And there is the fastest transit route to deliver cargo from Asia to Europe, and now it's not only coming from China to Europe, but in the opposite direction. The Kazakhstan transit is attractive for the stakeholders. That's why we will keep improving it, and we are starting the construction of the new railroad spur to expand transit of cargo from China, and the investments more than $20 billion. And there will be additional transportation corridors in the Eurasian corridor. The diversification of the routes has become a reality, and the corridor east-west and west-east is expanding, and it's a stable trend. The continental transit routes are not only competing with one another, but also with the sea routes, with marine routes. So I think the Eurasian region countries should strengthen coordination to avoid duplication, and we can use the resources accordingly. And the regular working meetings of the heads of the transportation agencies could serve to this effect. I share the ideas of the EEF to set up new forms of cooperation to unleash the potential of the region. It's up to our best interest to find the growth points to attract investments, create jobs, and support the stable growth in the future. An example of cooperations are plentiful. For example, in Chukotka, Minerals company from Kazakhstan are implementing a project of BAIM enrichment complex. It is one of the largest fields in the world, and it is possible to make use of the disruptive technologies to make use of the fields that were not considered profitable some time ago. That's why I would like to thank you, Mr. President of Russia, and your government for the support given. There was an MOU signed between the Republic of Kazakhstan and Sberbank to set up the digital governance platform. It's a high-quality breakthrough in the strategic partnership between the parties, and I think it's a manifestation of the high confidence that exists between Russia and Kazakhstan. Another example is a joint production of Sputnik V vaccine in Karaganda. And there is cooperation at the financial center of Astana, and there are more than 20 Russian companies participating, and we are cooperating in open space and there is a work ongoing on remote Earth probing, and that's why they are modernizing the facilities. There is a high level of interaction in the oil and gas industry. And in addition to the existing projects, in 2021, there was an agreement signed with Tatneft and Lukoil. And another vector of cooperation is the construction of the solar panel stations. And the group of companies of Terrell has implemented 7 projects of total 240 megawatts. And the construction of the tire production facility was kicked off, joint production with Lada company, and a number of the documents were signed to start the innovative projects by such companies as Kamaz, and I would like to take note of such an useful format of cooperation as the Regional Cooperation Forum. Next meeting of the forum is to take place in Kazakhstan. We hope the representatives of authorities and business from the Far East will take part in the meeting of the forum. And China is also a strategic partner of Kazakhstan. There are more than 50 joint projects being implemented, 24.5 billion USD. Over the past 5 years, 15 projects were finalized with the total sum of 4.3 billion USD. More projects to coming. There is projects related to renewables for 700 million USD. The cooperation in the food industry, and the investment has increased by 1.7. Another important partner is the Republic of Korea for Kazakhstan, and I paid a visit to the Republic of Korea. There are some 750 companies, joint companies working in Kazakhstan. 16 promising investment projects are at the stage of evaluation for 1.5 billion USD, tire production, residential building, agriculture. And the purpose of attracting investments is a priority of the economic policy of our country. Kazakhstan has attracting more than 365 billion USD of direct investments. Even last year, which was we had crisis, the increase was 35%. There was a special vehicle introduced yesterday, the Strategic Investment Agreement. Within the framework of the agreement, the government can find the list of incentives and tax breaks for the investors. And what is important for the investment, such projects are provided legal and fiscal stability. Thirdly, strengthening the cooperation with the Asia-Pacific countries. The trade turnover, not including the countries of North and South America, increased 73 billion USD. 94% of the amount falls for Russia, China, and Korea. And we have high prospects for cooperation and increasing its geography. The role of the Eurasian Economic Union is important, and it is expected to turn on an important player. We have an FTA with Vietnam. There are plans to have one with Singapore. We are looking into the prospects of having a free trade agreement with Indonesia. Within the framework of cooperation with China, the partners are developing on the expanding the agenda related to the industries, and there is work underway to strengthen cooperation with the Republic of Korea. 4, the pandemic has shown the drawbacks of the food security. The UN figures show that the prices for food has increased by more than 30%, resulting in malnourished people in the world, and 1 of the 10 are malnourished, and more than half of them live in Asia. Joint efforts should be needed to provide cheap and high-quality food to those in need, and that's why the leading agricultural country's role is important. Kazakhstan could make a contribution into this business as well. We have the volume of 50 billion in the agricultural and food industry, and more than 20% are exported, and the global brands are coming to Kazakhstan. In the next 15 years, we intend to double the export up to 7 billion USD. 70% of it will be processed food. And the industries of Kazakhstan and Russia could coordinate efforts to take the food products to international markets. And Kazakhstan is coordinating the efforts to start export of the food from Kazakhstan to China. And the food transit, similarly to supplies transit, could be an example of coordination. One of the important topics is to make a switch to low-carbon development, and there are efforts undertaken globally. The European Union intends to introduce the carbon cap tax, and the international companies are acquiring green assets. The oil and gas sector has less investments. All these things pose risks for our countries, which might result in the deficiency of the resources, inflation, and the drop in the level of life. And we should coordinate our efforts in facing these challenges. We will have to live through the transformation of the economic way of life, and it's a challenge for the national economically. Both at the regional and international level, it is only possible to be a winner if we act jointly. Kazakhstan intends to become carbon neutral by 2060, and we are increasing the share of the renewables in the energy mix. At the moment, it is 3%. And by 2030, the share of the renewables will come up to 15%. Green growth is the buzzword, the must of our times. The energy transition is inevitable. In my address to the people of Kazakhstan, I have set the task of studying the issue of starting the nuclear energy sector in Kazakhstan. And of course, we should study the requirements of the people and business. I think it is high time to look closely into this matter, because Kazakhstan is in need of the NPP. And taken into account that more than 60% fall for the nuclear energy, and I think these countries face the issue of transition to green energy. It is important to interact on the issues of green carbon neutrality. Despite the progress in technologies and the quality of life, the world is more vulnerable in terms of safety and security, and the existing mechanisms that are supposed to provide consensus fail both internationally and regionally. Kazakhstan adheres to the principle Eurasia is our common home, and we are prepared for constructive cooperation in all these spheres. The states of our unique continent should be a cohesive community for making a better future through mutually beneficial cooperation and trade, and this approach will provide an impetus to the development of global and regional cooperation, fomenting the new growth points in the economy. Thank you for your attention. And Mr. President, Kassym-Tokayev, on behalf of the Russian and Russian speakers, I would like to thank you for speaking Russian, and it just proves your statement made in the address that Russian will still be used in Kazakhstan. And I would like to note that I've been observing the reaction to your statement, because you cannot you can see that well because of the mask wearing, but Rosatom CEO Mr. Likhachev has been smiling when you have been talking about the nuclear energy prospects in your country. And in one of your address, you have referred to Afghanistan, and you have stated that the situation in Afghanistan is both a threat in terms that there might be insurgents, Taliban crossing over the river, and you have referred to the risks as well. And you have been working as a diplomat, and so you were vague. Could you please deliberate? And when you referred to the threats and risks, the threats and risks coming from this country are obvious. There's a lot of weaponry and armament left over by the U.S. More than $80 billion were spent on that. There is a threat of the refugees coming from this country, and we have a common approach on this sensitive issue together with the Russian Federation and with the countries of the Collective Security Treaty Organization. And there was a meeting of or summit of the CSTO initiated by President Putin, and we have discussed all the issues related to Afghanistan, and we took a decision to have a consolidated position regarding the risks and threats coming from this country. We act under the assumption that we should have judgment based on the actions. That's why we are closely monitoring the situation in Afghanistan, watching over the policy pursued by the power coming to Afghanistan. But our idea is a lasting peace to stay in this country. Okay, we will discuss it, and now the floor is given to the President of Mongolia.
Уважаемый Kassym-Jomart Kemylyevich, уважаемые участники форума, дамы и господа.
Dear President of Russia, dear President of Kazakhstan, ladies and gentlemen, I am happy to welcome you today. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to the President of the Russian Federation to take part in the 6th EEF. The EEF is being held for the 6th time, started from 2015, and Mongolia is taking part for the 4th time at the level of the head of state. It is a proof that Mongolia considers this forum is very important, and it is also the manifestation of our willingness to cooperate fruitfully with the countries of the region. And the number of the participants of the EEF is growing continuously, and they got together to exchange views, and we have here the representatives of the business, social and economic circles and the community, discussing the economic issues as humanitarian issues as well. It is the venue of dialogue for the Asia-Pacific, and I am sure that the outcomes of the discussion will be very important, and it will be multiple. And the slogan on the development of the Far East in the changing world takes place in the environment of the pandemic, and looking for the solutions to overcome the solutions that become the effects of the pandemic. We hope that the forum will be playing an important role of opening up the opportunities to overcome the crisis and to recover from the pandemic in the Pacific, with the invigoration of the cooperation in different areas, and it will also kick off important projects and programs. Fighting the pandemic is important, and the vaccination is indispensable for that. I would like to thank the countries that are developing and supplying vaccines against COVID-19, those countries and organizations that help Mongolia in the difficult times. I would like to take the opportunity, and on behalf of the peoples of Mongolia, I would like to thank the government of Russian Federation, Chinese Republic, India, that supplied their vaccines to Mongolia in the most difficult part, and also to the government for the financial support. The international and regional cooperation and the fair distribution of vaccines and the supply of the vaccines free of charge to different countries, exchanging ideas on fighting a pandemic is indispensable for overcoming the COVID-19 pandemic as soon as possible. I would like to congratulate the government of Japan for organizing the Olympic Games at such a difficult time. More than 11,000 countries from 206 countries have been taking part in the Olympics, and it was a great experience of organizing major sports event in difficult times. And we are celebrating the 100-year anniversary of diplomatic relations between Mongolia and Russia, and the relations have a rich history, and it will be enriched by the agreement on the strategic partnership, and it would make an contribution into the regional cooperation. The priority of our cooperation is friendly relations between two neighbors, Russia and China. I would like to note that our partnership is based on mutual understanding of the peoples, and it is developing and expanding in all the directions despite the difficult effects of the pandemic. Mongolia has been supporting the Russian initiative of the large Eurasian partnership and the Chinese One Belt, One Way initiative, and we are grateful for the possibility to participate in the infrastructural projects and the green development initiative. The purpose of the recovery of the economy is based on the Vision 2050 that was approved by the Parliament of Mongolia. The priorities are ore, manufacturing, food industry, agriculture, tourism, small and medium businesses, logistics, and innovative technologies. We will be happy to cooperate with the Far Eastern regions and the Asia-Pacific countries. Ladies and gentlemen, Mongolia has a unique geographical location bordering only on two major countries, the Russian Federation and the Chinese People's Republic. The economic sector of Mongolia is linked to our neighbors in the north and in the south. That's why we place great significance to the economic relations with these two countries. Mongolia is one of the 32 countries that is landlocked, but we are capable of using the advantages of our geographic position, and we are prepared to become the so-called transit Mongolia, to be the transit hub. Mongolia, just like the rest of the world, has been facing the economic implications of COVID-19. However, we are observing the recovery of the economy for the first 2 months. Between 2017 and 2019, the GNP has been growing by 6% annually per annum. Besides, The external trade had a proficiency of 1.2 billion. The foreign investments in the amount of 230 billions were stable. We did manage we managed the state debt, the currency volume has been growing, and there were favorable conditions to maintain the inflation at the low level. In between 2020 and 21, with the slowdown of the economic activity, the economy of Mongolia faced great challenges as well. To overcome the difficulties, we have pursuing the anti-cyclic policy, and we have taken the economy support measures to counter the economic crisis. We are vigorously cooperating with the other countries, the foreign investors and transnational corporations, and in addition to the mining industry, which is the main sector of industry in Russia, we provide support to the export-oriented companies, agricultural companies, the energy sector, and we are constructing the oil refinery at the moment. The Far East is rich in mineral resources, and it becoming an important economic hub of Asia. The entrepreneurs and businessmen are interested in this region and intend to invest into it. Our country has opened the trade office in Vladivostok to provide for the cooperation and expand economic activity, and we are sure that this step will be a major contribution into our economic cooperation. The activity of the representative office intends to provide for export by sea to the market of Asia and Southeast Asia, the import of goods from over there, as well as performing marketing survey, marketing research. Mongolia has always been paying attention to strengthening cooperation with the Eurasian Economic Cooperation. We are considering the conclusion of the FTA with the UAE, and it is intended to bring down the barriers in the external trade activity and make Mongolia part of the integration processes. I would like to refer to trilateral Russia-Mongolia-China program, and it refers to corridors for the haulage of the goods. We are cooperating with our neighbors in the construction of the railroad corridor, construction of the automobile roads, and construction of a pipeline from Russia to China through the territory of Mongolia. And there is a vigorous work to make the pre-feed of the pipeline running through Mongolia, and it will be one of the major projects in the Far East. The shortest automobile routes connecting Asia and Europe cross Mongolia. That's why when the trade volume between China and Russia is growing, between Asia and Europe is growing, and Mongolia is prepared to use the favorable geographical position, and it will be instrumental in economic cooperation. Mongolia is pursuing the open policy to facilitate trade and transportation, to make an access to seaports, and we have started the infrastructural projects such as construction of the new railroad net, expanding automobile road networks, and construction of new airport, and setting up a new regional transportation center. In the future, we'll have to accelerate the other viable projects, such as refurbishment of the Central Railroad corridor, that is a part between the corridor between China, Russia, and Mongolia, the railroad corridor connecting Baikal region and eastern Mongolia, and the western railroad corridor connecting Tiva and Mongolia, and the high speedway connecting the three countries. Mongolia is open for cooperation to implement these regional and international high profitability projects. Ladies and gentlemen, it is necessary to pay attention to the environment protection and undertake measures, because there are natural disasters occurring more often, and it could be detrimental for the stable economic development and affect the livelihood of people. The smoke from Yakutia reached Ulaanbaatar and even the North Sea, and the sand storms reached not only China, Japan, and Korea, but crossed the Pacific. And I think you tend to agree that for us, as neighbors of the regions, it is important to maintain cooperation at the regional level, to have joint projects to protect our countries from the natural disasters and maintain the environment from changes. To meet the energy requirements and to increase the renewables share in the energy mix, it is important to develop the connection grid centers. Mongolia is self-reliant in energy, but we can become the net exporter of energy, and we will be gravitating towards the renewables and implementing the projects of constructing the power plants, and such phenomenon as migration processes and the mutation of microorganisms and the others result in the risk of transfer of diseases from animals to humans, and there are trans-border risks that are becoming more obvious. That's why it is necessary to strengthen the exchange of information and experience, which will be important for strengthening our capacity to counter pandemic. We should set up conditions for economic growth, and I would like to call upon you to pay attention to our proposals to have activities implemented on biological safety and measures to counter pandemic. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish you all the best and success to the participants of the forum that gives an opportunity to exchange opinion on the development of the Asia-Pacific countries and further cooperation between these countries. We have heard a lot of new business ideas, and we have tried to present our stance on these issues. I would like to express gratitude to Russia for organizing the forum, and high appreciation to President Putin to take part in the forum. Thank you for your listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Well, very soon we will see implementation of the project by Gazprom, and I guess you will be able to see it even from space, this Trans-Mongolia pipeline. But so far, we can enjoy the beauty of the Ulaanbaatar and the beautiful steppe all around it. And around the steppe, you would see those diverting routes and roads and pathways that we see the nomads walking. How have you been doing vaccination, I'm curious? Were you trying to catch them all along the steppe? How willing are Mongolian people to get vaccinated, actually? Vaccination rates are going very well in Mongolia. And currently, the Ministry of Healthcare has registered 7 vaccines for emergency use. And the efficacy of the vaccines and the importance of vaccination is very well understood by Mongolian people, and they are very much willing to get vaccinated. Since February 2021, we've started the vaccination campaign. And today, around 90% of the target group of the population, or rather 68% of all the population, have been vaccinated. And we see very good results. Around 2% of the vaccinated get infected, but that demonstrates high efficacy of the vaccines we've administered. We vaccinate people of Mongolia with the vaccines produced by China, AstraZeneca, Sputnik V, and Pfizer. And all of those vaccines demonstrate good results. In the future, based on the recommendation of the WHO, we will further analyze the issue of vaccinated children starting from the age of 3 up to 17. And the most difficult question in this regard is raising trust of people towards vaccination. That is a general problem shared not just by Mongolia, but by the people of all around the world. And therefore, at the international level, we really need to unite our efforts to make sure that the vaccines are getting acknowledged internationally. 90% of the population vaccinated. Well, it looks like everyone is split into 2 teams. The countries that produce vaccines on their own and they need to persuade people to go and get vaccinated, and the second group who has to persuade people to go for it. Well, now it's very interesting to hear this conversation. While I was flying to Vladivostok just several weeks before, I went to Uruguay, to Latin America. We're shooting a movie there, and we were trying to draw some parallels between the quarantine that they were having in the country at the time of yellow fever. And now, I would say this is virtually the only country in the world where you are acknowledged to be vaccinated if you have been vaccinated with a vaccine that is acknowledged in the country of your permanent residence. So the issue of vaccination is not politicized there at all. So if you live in Russia and if you're vaccinated with a Russian registered vaccine, you're acknowledged vaccinated. But we'll talk about that later. And now I'd like to give the floor to the president of the country that produces vaccines, and they vaccinated 83 billion people. I obviously am talking about People's Republic of China. But before I give the floor to the presidency, I'd like to draw your attention to the latest news of the 24 hours, when China stated that despite the fact of the pandemic, and actually having combated the pandemic to a large degree, they're also opening up the Beijing Stock Exchange, additionally to what they have in Shanghai and Hong Kong. And of course, I would like to congratulate our Chinese colleagues at that. And now let us please listen to the address by the presidency.
尊敬的普京总统，
Your Excellency, President Putin, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I wish to thank President Putin for his gracious invitation. It is a great pleasure to address the Eastern Economic Forum again after 3 years. Today, we mark the 76th anniversary in the anti-Chinese war and the 76th anniversary of the Second World War. On the 25th of August, I spoke with President Putin over the phone. We both agreed that the international community must defend firmly the victorious outcomes of the Second World War, safeguard the truth of history, and stay committed to taking history as a mirror to open up a brighter future. Early in June, President Putin and I had a successful video conference meeting. Together, we have announced the extension of the China-Russia Treaty of Good Neighborliness and Friendly Cooperation, and reached new common understandings on major issues such as strengthening China-Russian strategic cooperation and advancing bilateral practical cooperation across the board. The China-Russia Comprehensive Strategic Partnership of Coordination for a new era boasts strong momentum and broad prospects. As we speak, the international landscape is going through profound transformation. The COVID pandemic keeps raging with frequent flare-ups, and the world economy faces a daunting recovery. This presents regional cooperation in Northeast Asia with both stern challenges and important opportunities. It is only right that all parties ground themselves in regional realities while adopting a global perspective, join hands to tide over the difficult time and plan for common development. We need to offer each other help to overcome the pandemic. We need to intensify cooperation in vaccine research, development and production, provide more public good to the international community, and firmly reject any politicization of COVID vaccines and origins tracing, and strive to build a global community of health for all. We need to redouble our efforts to advance mutually beneficial cooperation. We need to deepen the collaboration between the One Belt, One Road initiative and the Eurasian Economic Union, support the innovative development of the digital economy, jointly tackle global climate change, and promote social and economic development in the region. We need to form synergies to safeguard regional peace and stability in the region. We need to narrow differences and build consensus through dialogue and exchanges, embrace the concept of common, comprehensive, cooperative and sustainable security, and work for a harmonious and tranquil homeland for us all. This year marks the 100th anniversary of the founding of the Communist Party of China. And China has started a new journey towards fully building a modern socialist society. We are ready to work with all parties to uphold true multilateralism, advocate trust and harmony, promote win-win cooperation, and march with firm steps towards the goal of building a community with a shared future for mankind. Thank you for your attention. Well, that was a very informative presentation by President Xi, and that gives us more food for further discussion. He mentioned once again the issue of safety and security, echoing the President of Kazakhstan. We don't have to rush towards that. I'm sure we'll discuss that further. But I'd like to remind us all of the events of the previous week when we've seen the collective report being published by the security services of the United States, who stated that there is no proof showing that the coronavirus was coming from a Chinese laboratory or a Chinese open market in Wuhan. There are many more different versions. Well, President Putin, is that important to you where the virus is coming from? Well, it is always important to understand the reasons of any event. And finding and tracing the origins is important, but it is not proper and adequate to politize the origins. Whenever politicization comes into play, there is always less trust towards the conclusions that are being drawn based on that type of politicized approach. We always get to feel that the truth is somewhere far away from us. And all that type of research and discoveries should be conducted objectively, based on facts. But it's good to see that the US security services came to this conclusion. It should have been done much earlier. And it is also important to join forces to fight against the pandemic and its consequences. It is extremely important for the humankind. And in this connection, I'd like to say the following. Those people who are trying to politicize the situation are making colossal and dramatic mistakes in combating the pandemic. What I'm trying to say is that the opportunities for vaccination are mostly taken advantage of by the developed economies. This is where the majority of the vaccines are being produced, and they're being provided for protection of their respective citizens. And very, very little is being done to protect the humankind as a whole. And that is very bad for the manufacturers, first and foremost, because as a boomerang, it would come back to them, because the pandemic would be always in there around the globe, because we need to get everyone vaccinated to get the protection for the whole humankind. Unless we vaccinate African continent, we won't be able to combat the pandemic. And secondly, there are always humanitarian issues. We keep hearing about the so-called collective West, about the necessity to humanize international relations. Well, where is it? Instead of eliminating all the restrictions connected with the pandemic, at least in terms of spreading the medication, the vaccines, distribution, and supporting the countries that are in need, well, take the example of Iran. I don't want to go into politics now, but this country needs help badly. But no restrictions are being lifted, no sanctions being lifted, even in these situations. No discussions going on that. And take the example of other countries. Consider Venezuela. Let us leave politics aside. Humanitarian affairs is something that has to be applied consequentially if you want to be trusted. And as for economy, the same thing here. Economic recovery is happening first and foremost in those countries that use financial tools to inject liquidity and inject cash in their economies. And that is all happening at the cost of budget deficits. Well, why don't you help developing economies? But so far, that is not happening. Take a look at the level of budget deficits in the leading economies of the world. They have increased dramatically. Why? Because of the cash injection of the economy. And as a result, those economies are recovering faster. While it would be much better to take care and to think of the interest of all the participants of the economic activity. Well, this is something that we currently lack. But I would say that politicization of the situation would bring no good results. So it is important to unite our efforts. Well, it's actually no coincidence that I've mentioned Latin America. I've been the Secretary General of the Latin American Integration, and I was talking to the General Secretary of this organization, and I asked him, have you ever faced a situation that the Russians would come up with vaccines, and as people say, Russians are doing the vaccine diplomacy in a way that they demand something in exchange? And he told me, certainly not, and I'd like to double-check it with your colleagues from Kazakhstan and Mongolia. When a small and friendly country from the north called Russia was coming to you offering Sputnik V vaccine, were there any preconditions for using the vaccine? No, nothing of the kind was happening. On the contrary, the Russian government and the Russian people have rendered us great support, and the Mongolian citizens voluntarily are being vaccinated with Sputnik V. We do have vaccines from China. We have vaccine from AstraZeneca. We also have the Russian vaccines. And this is something I mentioned in my speech. And I'd like to use this opportunity to express my gratitude to President Putin and to the Russian Federation for offering support to Mongolia. Supplies of vaccines have played a major role to improve the situation in the country for the better. Thank you very much. Let us proceed. We have a lot of participants planned for today, and not all of them are online with us, but now I would like to listen to the address of Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi. Let's listen to that.
President of the Russian Federation, my dear friend, President Putin, Excellencies, participants of the Eastern Economic Forum, Namaskar. I am delighted to address the Eastern Economic Forum and thank President Putin for this honor. Friends, in Indian history and civilization, the word Sangam has a special meaning. It means confluence or coming together of rivers, people, or ideas. In my view, Vladivostok is truly a sangam of Eurasia and the Pacific. I applaud President Putin's vision for the development of the Russian Far East. India will be a reliable partner for Russia in realizing this vision. In 2019, when I had visited Vladivostok to attend the forum, I had announced India's commitment to an Act Far East policy. This policy is an important part of our special and privileged strategic partnership with Russia. Excellency, President Putin, I remember our detailed conversation during the boat ride from Vladivostok to Zvezda during my visit in 2019. You had shown me the modern shipbuilding facility at Zvezda and had expressed the hope that India would participate in this great enterprise. Today, I am delighted that one of India's biggest shipyards, Mazgaon Docks Limited, will partner with Zvezda for construction of some of the most important commercial ships in the world. India and Russia are partners in space exploration through the Gaganyaan program. India and Russia will also be partners in opening up the Northern Sea route for international trade and commerce. Friends, the friendship between India and Russia has stood the test of time. Most recently, it was seen in our robust cooperation during the COVID-19 pandemic, including in the area of vaccines. The pandemic has highlighted the importance of the health and pharma sectors in our bilateral cooperation. Energy is another major pillar of our strategic partnership. India-Russia energy partnership can help bring stability to the global energy market. My Minister of Petroleum and Natural Gas, Mr. Hardip Puri, is in Vladivostok to represent India at this forum. Indian workers are participating in major gas projects in the Amur region. From Yamal to Vladivostok and onward to Chennai, we envisage an energy and trade bridge. I'm happy that the Chennai-Vladivostok maritime corridor is making headway. This connectivity project, along with the international north-south corridor, will bring India and Russia physically closer to each other. Despite the pandemic, related restrictions, there has been good progress in strengthening our business links in many areas. These include long-term supply of coking coal to the Indian steel industry. We are also exploring new opportunities in agro-industry, ceramics, strategic and rare earth minerals, and diamonds. I'm happy that diamond industry representatives from Shakha Yakutia and Gujarat are having a separate interaction as part of this forum. I'm confident that the $1 billion soft credit line announced in 2019 will create many business opportunities between both countries. It is also useful to bring together the most important stakeholders, regions of the Russian Far East and relevant states in India on the same platform. We should take forward the useful discussion that took place during the visit of Chief Minister of key Indian states in 2019. I would like to extend an invitation for the governors of 11 regions of the Russian Far East to visit India at the earliest. Friends, as I said, at this forum in 2019, Indian talent has contributed to the development of many resource-rich regions of the world. India has a talented and dedicated workforce, while the Far East is rich in resources. So, there is a tremendous scope for Indian workforce to contribute to the development of the Russian Far East. The Far Eastern Federal University, where this forum is being held, is home to a growing number of students from India. Excellency, President Putin, I thank you again for giving me this opportunity to speak at this forum. You have always been a great friend of India, and under your guidance, our strategic partnership continues to grow from strength to strength. I wish all participants at the Eastern Economic Forum every success. Spasiba. Thank you. Thank you very much.
President Putin, I guess just the day before yesterday, you've been to Moscow Lomonosov University, to the Innovative Center in there. Yes, that's correct. And I remember you made a remark there on the fact that the Northern Sea route is of interest to many countries that actually have nothing to do with it geographically. But we've just heard the Prime Minister of India mentioning the Northern Sea route and the support that India could render. Despite the fact of India being a southern country, have you mentioned India as one willing to participate there? Well, you should have mentioned the continuation of this remark. I have also stated there that we very much welcome the type of interest. We very much welcome it. And it is also important to bear in mind that we've been watching those processes evolve in various countries. India is not one of those countries, but we hear some say and express some concern that Russia is way too active on working on the Northern Sea route. And we've also heard some assumptions that presumably we're trying to restrict or limit access to the route for others. Well, that is certainly not true. We don't have any plans of the kind. More than that, we very much want this work and this process to be structured strongly in line with the international maritime law, dating back to 1982, as far as I remember. And there is one more international document guiding the cooperation in the Arctics. And we are very much open for this cooperation. We currently stick to those rules, and we are determined to stick to those documents in the future. We're guided by them, and we are completely satisfied with that. And that also means that the Northern Sea route is most economically feasible and safest route, going through the Russian waters and through the domestic seas of Russia. So what kind of concerns could we have? We are quite satisfied with the current situation. And the more efficient we are in using this route by all the stakeholders, the better. And we very much welcome the interest expressed by India, the interest from the People's Republic of China, other European countries. And I very much hope that under the Northern Council and the Arctic Council, where Russia currently presides, we will certainly revisit those discussions. And we have paid sufficient attention to this issue at the meeting we've had in Geneva with President Biden. And I very much hope that we'll get feedback from all the partners, including Canada, Denmark, and other stakeholders of the process. We count on their interest, And we hope that we all would be focused on searching a platform not for confrontation, but for shared joint work. I also would like to pay your attention to one more interesting aspect, something that was mentioned by the President of Kazakhstan. He said that it is a habit for us, the traditional Asia-Pacific region for us. President of Mongolia was also mentioning Asia-Pacific region. The Prime Minister of India said India-Pacific region, but this is something that we can discuss later when we talk about security issues. But now let's listen to one more address, and that will be the Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Thailand, Prayut Chan-o-cha.
ท่านประธานาธิบดีรัสเซีย
Your Excellency, President of the Russian Federation, Your Excellency, President of the Republic of Kazakhstan, President of Mongolia, distinguished guest, I wish to express my sincere appreciation to President Putin for inviting me to the 6th Eastern Economic Forum, an important venue for leaders and high-level representatives to exchange views with world-leading companies and to find a new way forward towards sustainable post-COVID-19 recovery and growth. Many countries, including Thailand, are still facing challenges from COVID-19 pandemic. Though vaccines have been developed, their rollout in many regions have proceeded at a slow pace and not in an inclusive manner, particularly in developing and low-income countries. Economists share views that to overcome this health crisis, we must ensure that all countries have access to and inclusive distribution of COVID-19 vaccines as soon as possible. In this regard, I urge that COVID-19 vaccines be considered as a global public goods and also urge that all countries with high inoculation rates share vaccines with all regions in order to facilitate international travel. For Thailand, the government and all relative sectors are doing their utmost to provide vaccines for all the residents of the country. We aim to inoculate at least 70% of the population by the end of this year. In addition, our medical team and researchers are developing homegrown vaccines, some of which are already in the phase of clinical trials on human with satisfactory result. More importantly, Thailand has potential and readiness to be vaccine production base and distribution hub in the Mekong sub-region and Southeast Asia. In the meantime, the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank reported a worrying figure that in 2020, nearly 100 million people have fallen into poverty. This figure points to the ongoing challenges that will continue into the post-COVID-19 period, especially the widening gap and inequality. With these in mind, all countries should adhere to multilateralism and further reinforce interconnectivity based on sustainable development that leaves no one behind. While we continue combating and learning to live with the COVID-19, I deem it important for all countries to integrate policy packages that strike a balance between the economic, social and environmental aspects. Allow me to share our ideas on the three main keys to pandemic recovery during new normal era. The first key to pandemic recovery is the promotion of sustainable development that is well balanced between economic development, technology, agreement, social equality, and environmental sustainability. Thailand has adopted the sufficiency economy philosophy as a development approach focusing on strengthening from within, promoting human empowerment and security, as well as building resilience in future uncertainties. To implement the ECP, Thailand has applied the economic model known as Bio-Circular Green Economy, or BCG. which aims at developing bioeconomy, circular economy, and green economy. The BCG model is driven by new technologies and innovation to build upon Thailand's strengths in agriculture, biodiversity, and cultural diversity. In this regard, we are pleased to exchange our experiences with all countries in such areas as smart farming, innovations in agri-food industry, and sustainable tourism. The BCG model serves as one of the approaches to sustainable, balanced, and inclusive growth, and also corresponds with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the so-called CDGs. The second key to recovery lies in enhancing competitiveness in industrial and labor sectors, as well as strengthening the inter-regional supply chains. The International Labour Organization, ILO, estimates that the global unemployment is expected to stand at 205 million people in 2022, surpassing the level of 187 million people in 2019. This figure reflects disruption of the global economy induced by the pandemic, in particular among the micro, small, and medium enterprises due to their limited capacity to respond to shocks and disruptions. Thus, for sustainable recovery, we need to make greater use of digital technology. We need to transform traditional change into digital change, and to ensure international ecosystem as well as domestic law and regulation that are conducive to digital trade growth. This includes promotion of e-signature recognition, restructuring of labor sector that is resilient and adaptive to new market, including upskilling and reskilling of human resources essential to the digitally transformed future. Of no less significance is to accelerate free trade agreements, negotiations between countries and region. Currently, Thailand has FTAs with 18 countries and one economy. We hope to conclude more FTAs with other key economies in different regions, including the Eurasian Economic Union, which is a highly potential market in Eurasian region. In this regard, Thailand will continue constructive dialogue with the EA-EU member countries, including Russia and Kazakhstan, to move this crucial agenda forward. The third key to recovery lies in forging connectivity between regions. Taking part in the EEF, I realize the prospect of the Far Eastern region as a linkage between Russia and the Asia-Pacific, which is in line with Russia's Greater Eurasian Partnership. I see opportunities in both regions to further cooperate in order to reinforce connectivity in infrastructure, trade and investments, tourism, as well as to exchange ideas on developing the special economic zones. On our part, Thailand is developing the Eastern Economic Corridor, or EEC, located alongside Thailand's eastern coastlines and renowned for its world-class tourism destinations. This EEC shares similar elements with Russia's Far Eastern regions centered around Vladivostok. I see that these two regions are brimming with potential and can become gateways to each other. With the EEC strategic location in Southeast Asia, excellent infrastructure, and modern investment incentives, we welcome foreign investments in the EEC, in particular in digital technologies, health and well-being, and smart logistics. Tourism connectivity is another top priority for all countries, as tourism is a key economic growth engine that is badly hit by the pandemic. Therefore, it is important that we start resuming cross-border travel. Thailand is taking a step-by-step approach to reopen the country to tourists, which started in July 2021 with the Phuket Sandbox and the Samui Plus program. Such programs will expand into other areas in the country should the situation permits. In the meantime, we should initiate discussion on the international travel guidelines and mutual recognition of vaccine certificates in order to facilitate travel and tourism industry in the future. Distinguished guests, the COVID-19 crisis has caused the deepest global recession since the Second World War. In order to reinvigorate our economies, we need to work hand in hand at all levels. Thailand reaffirms our readiness to continue working actively on this agenda with all partners in the United Nations and regional organizations, such as ASEAN, ACMIX, BIMSTEC, ASEM, and APEC. As APEC chair in 2022, Thailand will focus on the post-COVID-19 recovery with emphasis on trade and investment facilitation, reconnecting in all dimensions, especially travel and tourism, and inclusive sustainable growth. All of these must be driven by digital technologies and innovation in order to achieve tangible results. Thailand stands ready to welcome delegations of APEC's member economies in Thailand in 2022, which will be the first time for APEC leaders to meet in person since the APEC summit in Papua New Guinea in 2018. I look forward to welcoming President Putin and all APEC leaders to the APEC summit. The aforementioned three key concepts for recovery coincides with the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. I look forward to working closely with all of you to drive forward our regions that are sustainable, resilient, and leave no one behind. Thank you.
Владимир, поедете на саммит АТЭС в Таиланд?
Mr. President, will you go to the summit of the APEC? If it is held online, and will you come to Brunei for the APEC summit, November 2024? Are you going to come yourself or send somebody? There is a lot of time left till 2024. With the pandemic, nothing is certain, and we have to work and not think about such large, great events on the international spectrum. There will be another event, the presidential election as well. I understand it. And another question about the future. Will it not be a pity to let Shoigu and Lavrov go to the State Duma? Yes, it would be a pity, because they are working very well on their places, but colleagues made a request to put them on top of the list, showing that everything that United Russia does truly is put into practice, inter alia, through the efforts of those people. But the decision will be made in September. The decision has to be made by them. They are the ones who need to make this decision in the end. And another question about the future. Will there be a day when here to Vladivostok, to this forum, or to St. Petersburg, for example, the Ukrainian president comes? Why not? I hope that it happens, because I think that the situation that we find ourselves in today is completely unnatural and far from normal, and sooner or later, better sooner than later, we'll be able to restore our relations to the full. Perhaps I saw the wrong programs, but I watched them carefully. When President Zelensky was in Washington, my colleagues in BBC talked about unavoidable Afghanistan, aborts in Texas, floodings in Spain, but they made no mention of the visit. It seems that in Russia more attention is paid to such events. But in the future, Ukrainian president probably will come, but President Zelensky in person, will it be possible for a visit. It does not depend on us, it depends on the Ukrainian people. They are the ones to define the level and quality of the work of those people who they voted for, and if President Zelensky is elected and truly pursues a policy aimed at normalizing relations with Russia, why not? Of course, I would welcome it. Unfortunately, in practice, often it happens the other way. A lot of candidates come with mottos to restore relations with Russia, to solve all the matters that have accumulated over the years, but later, without any compunction, they lie to their electors and they turn and they make a U-turn in their policies. It happens under the pressure of nationalists. It seems that the newly elected leaders, once assuming their higher office, start to be concerned about that part of the Ukrainian society and do everything in their power to satisfy their ambitions. But what results it leads to, we can see in practice by the state of affairs in the social sphere in Ukraine. What versions about Maluta Skuratov? You met with the governor of Tver. He said that he will build a church on the place where Maluta Skuratov asphyxiated Philip. You say that it is one of the versions. What other versions are they? The second version is simpler, that there was no murder. When it comes to the construction of a church, on such an occasion, I believe that the Moscow Patriarch should be the one to bless it. And another question about the future, after which we will return to our general agenda. Forgive me, our foreign guests. We have here a very Russian context. I have a name written down here. What future does Nicanor Tolstoy have? And who is that? It is a boy in the Ocean Center who mentioned that you misspoke, and you said that it was not nothing worn by the 7-year-old. And there was quite an uproar about it. I do not even know anything about it. It is great news about the latest 48 hours. Since I was here dealing with current issues and was preparing for today's events, I did not even pay attention to that. That's why I'm not sure how to react. So you were not offended by the correction. Why should I be offended? I can only welcome it. Young people, they know very well the history of their country. Right now, I understood what you were talking about. When it comes to the 7-year war, the 20-year war, it started in 1700, in effect, after Prayut I joined the Union of Countries organized by Frederick II, the Saxonish king, who later shifted his goals. The Poltava battle, if I'm not mistaken, happened late in autumn in 1709. It was a landmark after which everything started to go Russia's way. It was 8 years and a half, because the Narva battle, when Russia was defeated, happened in spring. But the Poltava battle happened late in autumn, so it was 8 years and a half. Essentially, everything was done within those 8 years. But it makes no difference, really, and I'm even surprised by your question. For some reason, I called it a 7-year war, even though It is clear that it ended in 1721. And I can only be glad that our young people are so well educated and that they are ready to express their opinions. This is what should make us understand that the future of our country is in good hands. Mr. President, before we turn to the next topic, I need to present myself once again. 1 year and a half, I was asked to revitalize the premium, and I started to study those issues. And today, I was a little bit concerned when you started to talk about green hydrogen. I'm not sure that everyone knows green hydrogen is hydrogen from air, solar batteries, wind energy. Energy is produced, electricity, hydrogen, then it is burned, and CO2 is emitted. You said that we need to make calculations here. A ton of hydrogen is 3 to 6 times more costly compared with other types of hydrogen that can be produced from coal. What am I leading to? Carbon dioxide emissions reduction is a very important goal. Climate change is something that we cannot argue with. The consequences of permafrost melting are very dangerous. But at the same time, isn't it wrong to say that green technologies are a panacea, a all-around solution? New technologies are appearing. Is it possible to discuss it calmly? Because sometimes there is a feeling that people are trying not to protect the nature, but rather to distribute subsidies to support technologies that right now are much more expensive than their alternatives. I believe that your concerns are justified in a way. Some economies in some countries want to deprive other countries of their competitive advantages. This is why there is a lot of talk in the EU, for example, about an environmental tax, in essence. And undoubtedly, we're interested in working jointly to preserve the nature. We want to make steps to prevent catastrophic climate change, but we cannot agree to the proposed rules that obviously go against the WTO rules. We closely follow those discussions, and we will work with our partners in all the regions of the world, including in the EU. We see that it is not a consolidated stance right now, and experts at the governmental level in many leading countries of the EU understand that the initially announced stance cannot be called an approach that meets international standards and approaches. Once again, I would like to reiterate that we will be cooperating with everyone, but unfortunately, this is a very important thing. Such an important thing as fighting against climate change usually and often is used to solve current economic tasks. It is guided by the desire to restructure the market, and sometimes it is politicized. Right now we have heard about the development of nuclear energy. Nuclear energy, how does it influence emissions? It does not. Some of our colleagues in our partner countries propose not to take into account the capabilities of nuclear plants when calculating economical well-being, as well as hydro energy. And in our country, nuclear energy accounts for almost 40% in our balance. These are very serious things. That is why we need to closely follow the development of technology. You were right when you said that hydrogen can be produced from coal, from gas. Green hydrogen is 7 to 8 times more costly, around 6 times more costly. But technologies are changing, and later we might see that prices are getting lower. We have to closely follow those developments. If we speak with experts, we have here the Minister of Energy. I do not hear exactly where he is right now, but with him we quite regularly and in detail discuss all those matters. We not only follow the developments in the world, but we ourselves also take the necessary steps in order to not fall behind, in order to preserve our leading positions in energy and in the energy of the future in particular. Perhaps Gazprom, Surgutnefteengaz, and other leading companies in the field of energy might criticize me, but next week there will be a declaration of prize winners, and we have tripled the number of candidates. Now there are 106 nominations. After the expansion, there was an opportunity to see, in a broader sense, what trends exist in the field. And despite the ceremony of award will already happen next week, I will risk and name a person who won the energy in the traditional energy. This man is Magiev, a Russian candidate who deals with coal matters. Indeed, right now some technologies can be more costly. In the future, they can become less pricey. We heard the matter touched by the president of Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan is a major exporter. Mongolia is a major exporter. So we understand that renewable energy will, with time, account for a major percent of the balance, and the demand will change. President of Kazakhstan talked about a generalized approach. How can the approach towards oil production be generalized? When it comes to Kazakhstan, in our balance, coal accounts for more than 70%. That is why we speak about using renewable technologies. I agree that technology is developing today. It is true, something that seems very pricey tomorrow can become very cheap. That is why it is very important not to miss that moment. We need to develop technologies and use best practices abroad. Look at China. In the 15th century, 60% of world economy belonged to China. The name of China, the middle state, is not something that came from nowhere. It controlled the overwhelming majority of world economy. But then it missed the technological revolution in the West, particularly in Great Britain, and he fell victim to aggression and became colonially dominated by England, France, and other powers. Why does China closely works with developing technologies? Because it has learned the lessons from its past and its history. I believe that we also should learn certain lessons, because we cannot rest still. We have traditional energy sources, coal, oil, gas, but we need to take into account that there are global transformations. I agree that there are opportunities. There are new international taxes that are being introduced, and we need to analyze how well they meet the WTO standards. We need to cooperate closely in order to transform our economies. I believe that Kazakhstan has announced a quite reasonable strategy to reach carbon neutrality by 2065, 2060. It requires fitting equipment and technologies. What will happen in 30 years? Nobody knows, only God knows. But while we trust in God, we also should trust in ourselves. And I agree that all those matters related to the future of our economies should not be politicized. Politicization often leads to a loss of objectivity. And makes anything be prejudiced. And it is very dangerous from the point of view of state security. That is why I advocate for Kazakhstan and other countries to cooperate actively, particularly with its closest partners, and be trending, as they say now. Though I do not like English words and I practically do not use them, but there are some popular words that I am forced to say.
А что Монголия?
And what about Mongolia? I hope that Mongolian gas transit will be more successful when Ukrainian transit, but it is interesting, Mongolia. Will you take the opportunity to use the gas in the part of the gas pipeline that we have been working about? Will you develop solar energy? The gas pipe connecting Russia and China and that will cross the territory of Mongolia is a mega project for our three countries. Right now, research is being conducted. We are working to create an economic corridor that will contribute to the development of green economy as well of our countries. Climate change of ecosystems is our common problem. I believe that it is not a problem of a single country, it is a global problem. Today, the coronavirus pandemic is testimony to the fact that we have mismanaged our nature and our ecosystems. That is my personal opinion. That is why developing renewable energy is a priority for the economy of our country. We have all the necessary opportunities and possibilities, a lot of potential to develop solar and wind energy plants. We intend by 2030 to make the levels reach 30%, to make renewable energy account for 30%. It is also very important to ensure connectivity within Northeastern Asia when it comes to energy cooperation. Apart from electric energy that we receive from solar and wind sources, we also set ourselves a goal to cooperate with other countries in this regard and increase the amount of renewable energy in the overall balance of our energy in the country. Apart from that, the gas pipeline about which we have spoken We believe that it is a great opportunity for our country to join the process of gasification, and it will contribute greatly to decreasing greenhouse emissions in our country and improving the environmental situation. 1.1% of world greenhouse emissions is the figure that accounts for Mongolia, but nevertheless we pay a lot of attention to this matter. Protecting the land is our common goal and our common job. And it is the goal of our joint cooperation. For example, from 2005, Mongolia have been conducting the program 100,000 solar yurts, 100,000 nomad families are using solar batteries under this program. It has great importance for preserving the ecosystem in our country. Thank you for your attention.
Хотел
Thanks a lot. To conclude this subject with more specific cases, there was an agreement signed on Ukhnaagiin field, and the Baimsk field was mentioned as well. It is at Chukotka and based on the expertise of Kazakhstan. It is copper. It was discovered in 1972, and in 1980 it was considered not profitable because it's a swamp area, lowlands, and it's a new phase, and there is a road under construction, and the Trumps and the low-carbon technologies will be applied as well. And I do not want to take it all from Tokayev and do not give him a chance to talk about it. But in the future, this approach will be rolled out for the other project as well. It is the traditional technology, but at the same time, it's based on different, on new environmental standards. Isn't it so? True. In September, there will be opening of the new Tugay facility, and personally, I intend to be present at the opening ceremony. As far as the enrichment facility is concerned, I would like to inform you that it was acquired by Minerals for 900 million USD, and the investments volume by 2028 would be 8 billion USD. The ore field is very promising, and it looks the future looks bright, though until now it was not considered profitable. Why the change? Why is it profitable now? Because new disruptive technologies are planned to be used. I'm not going into details about them. I would like to note that all the digitization tools are used. 7 dump trucks with the capacity of 350 tons work. These are unmanned trucks, and drones are used to provide industrial safety, and all these things will be used at the Kazakhstani ore field on Tugay. And this is an example of successful cooperation of Russia and Kazakhstan, and we are looking forward to developing Baimsky field, and we will be working on Tugaysky as well. And the one of the owners are Russians, and then Kaz Minerals. So it's a Eurasian project. It's great. It's good. It's viable. But there's one challenge that you have mentioned. It is the depopulation, migration of people from the Far East. Drastic. No, not drastic. And the depopulation rates are slower now. But are people still leaving? Still leaving this for the central part of Russia. But if there are places where the facilities are good, like at the Zvezda, Bolshoi Kamen, across the Amur Straits, yes, but they have a shortage of specialists, and they even bring the specialists labor from other parts, and so that's how the work should be done, and good, interesting, highly paid jobs should be created. That's what we are having and hosting the Eastern Economic Forum for, to look for those projects. Those that live at the highest floors, and if you can look out of the windows, you could see Zvezda shipyards. And I must say that they do not have such dry docks, even in the Soviet Union. And we didn't have such a large-scale shipbuilding facilities as we have in Zvezda now. We have it now in Russia, and I hope this trend will prevail. And it was mentioned already that the favorable conditions for livelihood should be created. This type of activity should go hand in hand with the endeavors of the states, residential, property, construction, health care, education. And it's a set of the social welfare measures that the state has been implementing, and we will be ramping up that kind of efforts. Let me ask another difficult question. At least it is difficult for me. I'm traveling a lot in the Far East, and I visited many places, new facilities as well. And here is a gap, a contrast that I have paid attention to. Visiting a facility like Vanino coal terminal. It is actually the facility of the 21st century. No coal dust. All the workers wearing corporate overalls, and the mess for the workers is great. But if you step outside of the perimeter, the life is different. So the facilities are great, but the life around is not that good. And who is responsible for the environment around, for the living conditions in the forest? Is it municipality? You should not blame the municipality. We should refer to the allocation of the resources at different levels, like the federal, regional level, and the municipal level. All the Far East region was an off-limits territory, out of bounds, and Vladivostok was out of bounds for foreigners, and a lot of it is a legacy of the Soviet Union, when the social welfare sector has not been developing. The living quarters, I mean the living structures, have been built around the enterprises, and that's how it was for decades. And that's the legacy of the long-forgone times. And what shall we do about it? We should not throw stone against our predecessors. They were working in difficult conditions, and they faced a lot of challenges. And it does not refer only to Vladivostok, but to the other towns and cities. We just be thankful to them for, with limited resources, they managed to achieve a lot. Now we should, based on what we have, and with the tasks that the country faces, we should move forward. I have referred to the renovation of the settlement and the villages and communities of the Far East. And actually, I had a list of those villages and towns, but I refrained from making it public because first we should do the preparatory work. But anyway, I think it is worthy to mention that we have a list of those settlements, and I have mentioned just two, and they should have a better fate, a better destiny, because the people from over there participated in the construction of Baikal-Amur Railroad Road, and they have deserved a better future. And of course, and the representatives of the businesses are doing a lot in the locations where they are working, and the efforts should be undertaken for the living environment and the social welfare sector be of a different high quality. So it's necessary to build residential properties, take care of the health care and education. Is it possible to do all these things? It is a large strategic mission, and the experience of the recent years have shown that we are moving in the right direction. I would like to devote the last part of our discussion something that we have mentioned. It is Afghanistan and the effects of the withdrawal. You have mentioned that you are not going to be vindictive, and the others did that, and there was a reference to the end of the hegemony of the West. One of the media mentioned it, and I was surprised by the materials from the European Center of the External Policy, and it read that the U.S. are turning into a normal country. By normalcy, they mean that they are shedding the function of the global policeman. If the U.S. as a global policeman is no more, who will be responsible for the world order then? And the United Nations should be the entity responsible, and the Security Council, and including the permanent members of the SC. And it is a very convenient pretext to start gloating at what has happened in Afghanistan, and it's a catastrophe. It's a debacle, and these are not my words. These are the words of the U.S. politicians. Catastrophe, and the Americans are very pragmatic, and they have spent more than 1.5 trillion USDs. And what are the deliverables? What are the outcomes? Zero. If you look at the number of the people stranded over there that has been working to help the U.S. and the allies, it is also a humanitarian catastrophe. And I think that there will be a realization that it is not possible to work from the previous positions, trying to civilize, to bring the elements of the civilization in the like and image of those who are doing that is a wrong policy. And I heard it from my colleagues that Afghanistan was a mistake. Yes, we were wrong. We should not do similar kind of things in the future. But these were the deeds from the time immemorial, from when the Catholic priests have been procrastinating, coming to China and trying to civilize the local, underpinned by the achievements of the science and natural science and medicine. But the main purpose was not that, but to promote Catholicism. things change, and we are not talking about spiritual canalization, but these are the endeavors to preserve influence through promotion the principle of democracy. Peoples, when they do need democracy, they will have it. You should not impose democracy on them. And technically and technologically, we can understand what has happened. The Russian troops have been withdrawing from Afghanistan as well, but in an organized manner. And then the regime that was left over stayed there for a few years. Had it not been for the Soviet Union, that in the last years before its collapse had not stopped to provide economic relief, who knows how the situation would have developed. And it's quite possible that the warring parties would manage to come to terms, to make a truce. But how did the U.S. did? There was airlift organized for the U.S., but the Soviet Union troops were withdrawing by land, and it was easier for the Soviet Union to do that. Talking about the end of the hegemony of the West, that's how I see it. There are lessons learned, but they should be understood, and there should be changes introduced into the real policy. They say that, well, Afghanistan was a mistake and we should not have started it, but the same policies are still being pursued against other countries. What about economic sanctions? It's still the same thing. It's imposing, disciplining the other countries. I'm not only referring to Russia. You can take other examples of the Asia-Pacific countries or South America, globally, around the world. And if there will be conclusions drawn, major conclusions on that, then we can witness the drastic changes in the global politics. But whether it's the end of domination or not the end of domination, many things depend on the economic potential that are actors at the international arena. And our task is for us to work jointly with our partners and to use the rule that the Prime Minister of India has referred to, Sangam, confluence, to achieve better results for the development of your own countries. And in this case, the significance and the voice of Russia will be more influential and important, and it would be beneficial not only for Russia but for our partners. Let's ask our partners. And speaking this week, President Biden has formulated what you have mentioned, that the era of the armed military operation for state building is over, something like that. What I was concerned and about this statement when listening the whole of it is as follows. Of course, he is the president of the U.S. and he was addressing his own nation first, but I think there were expectation is not to the world, but at least to the allies. But President Biden has not referred to his allies that were participating in the Afghanistan campaign, and it was not for the first time that there was a reference that we have an agreement that there'll be no terror attack against us. He didn't say that, well, it's up to the other countries to take care of themselves, but there is a construct in my head. I'm not sure it's some kind of scheme, like could it be possible to sacrifice the interpreters that have been working over there with the U.S. For decades, and the rights of the women and girls could be sacrificed as well, and it was mentioned that the rights, the women and girls will not be enjoying the rights they had under the U.S. regime. But on withdrawing, there are challenges with the weapons overspilling to the neighboring countries, the refugees, and I cannot but disagree with you. You're a state politicians, and I'm a journalist. And what are the consequences? What are the effects of withdrawal of the U.S. From Afghanistan? And won't it be a start of the confrontation with the Muslim state, and the new confrontation is Panjshir? What are your expectations? What are you waiting for? Of course, we were worried with what has been happening in Afghanistan. We have taken measures for evacuation of our citizens, though we have left our embassy behind, which got in contact with Taliban representatives, and we managed to agree on a provision of security for the diplomats and the embassy property. Besides, at the request of the UN, we have provided the opportunity for the UN staff to make use of 2 charter flights to move from Afghanistan to Kazakhstan, and they are working in Kazakhstan now. We have provided the airspace and the airports of Kazakhstan for the safe passage and refueling of the airplanes that were evacuating the contingents of people working in Afghanistan, both the NATO member states and the U.S. As far as giving refuge to the Afghans working with the U.S., whether it was 2 months or half a year or 1 month, we have not resolved this issue. We did not give a positive response to it because it related to the sovereignty of the Kazakhstan, because people who were supposed to come to the territory of Kazakhstan did not have entry visas, and the logistics itself did not make it possible to positively resolve this issue. Regarding with respect to the consequences, Afghanistan will not be Afghanistan as it was some time ago. There is a new regime as far as Panjshir Valley, and the resistance headed by the son of Ahmad. And it is difficult to predict what will happen, because right now Taliban has a winning hand. But we will keep monitoring the activity of the Taliban regime. We are registering the peaceful statements made. We have observed that the leaders of the Taliban have expressed their willingness to have friendly relationship with all the countries, and I think they include the countries of the Central Asia into the list of those countries, and once again making one step back for the Central Asia countries, especially those that are members of the SCTO, should keep together, because the development of the events is unpredictable. And I think the near future will give us many people, Afghanis, that will be willing to cross the border to settle beyond the limits of their country to ensure their own safety. And that will pose a problem for the neighboring countries. As far as the U.S. is concerned, I'm not going to be gloating over it. And there is a difference from what was happening in the Soviet Union. We should close this page. We should think about the future of Afghanistan. It was a good market for Kazakhstani merchandise. First of all, it is grain, and they've been paying well. And we have agreed with President Ghani that they will send a trade mission to Kazakhstan to sign the respective agreement to diversify the cooperation in the trade and economic sphere. This never happened, but still people need food. Children need food, even under Taliban, and they are interested in receiving a variety of goods from Kazakhstan as well. And it's a major factor that will define our attitude to this regime. As far as the U.S. is concerned, some of the experts have been saying that the U.S. do not care what is happening outside of the CONUS, continental U.S., and the life will be going on. But I tend to disagree with that sentiment. I believe there will be major consequences for the U.S. and for the policies pursued by the U.S. because the Afghanistan debacle is a very serious matter, and indirectly it will be affecting the policies of such a country as the U.S. I will not undertake to foresee, to predict how the event situation in Washington and the White House will be developing. That's not the subject matter of the current discussion, but there will be effects.
Well, Mr. President, I have a very practical question to you. It might surprise you, but probably it won't. So, what is most frightening in the moment to everyone as a human being? Well, there is nothing you invented. Just like Fidel Castro let all the convicts go at a certain moment, the same might be happening with the refugees of Afghani people. There might be true refugees, but there might be also all types of suicide bombers or terrorist fighters. So you are a Kazakh national. I know that Kazakh and Uzbek people understand one another very well. So you are Kazakh. Can you identify just facially, is it an Uzbek national from Uzbekistan or maybe from Afghanistan that might be a much more dangerous person? So now in the CSTO, in the European Union, do we have well-proven, tested mechanism to at least control the migration processes so that we could somehow monitor them? Because obviously those refugees would be streaming soon. You personally, are you capable to detect this is a person from Uzbekistan, this is a person from Afghanistan? Well, obviously, that's simple. We all grew up in the Soviet Union. And the person who grew up in the Soviet Union and now lives on the territory of a former Soviet Republic and now in the post-Soviet space can be easily identified. At least to me, that's very obvious. And I think it was always easy to detect them. Having worked in Singapore for quite a while, I was meeting a lot of people when I was working at the consulate, those who were transfer passengers, and back then Aeroflot was only flying over to Singapore, and from over there you would have to do a layover to Australia, to Philippines. and the Soviet people would have to change flights there. And whenever I was requested to meet one or another delegation going over to Australia afterwards, I would easily identify them, or be that a delegation coming back from Australia and doing a layover in Singapore. But in any case, we are easily recognized everywhere. That's just the legacy we share, and that's the situation we have. Well, as for migration authorities and migration officers, well, that's their direct duty. So I don't think we're going to encounter any problems on that. As for the language, as you all know, Taliban is mostly comprised of Pushtun, and they speak Pushtun language. Common language for international communication in Afghanistan is Dari language, as far as I remember, and that is very close to Persian language and Tajik language. As for other countries, including Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Turkmenistan, we speak the family of Turk languages. So we understand one another, but that is a different family of languages. And therefore, we have a big cultural and linguistic diversity, but we can differentiate one another and recognize facially. Well, let us hope under the CST we would have the shared expertise on that. So my last question to you. You still have an embassy in Kabul. Are you going to recognize Taliban? It looks like that during these 24 hours, the issue of who would head the government should be resolved today. Well, that's a tricky question. It certainly requires very careful approach and consideration. I've been mentioning it, I guess, already 3 times in my speeches, that we are going to carefully watch any actions taken by Taliban, and that would define our solution. But again, being very realistic in our approach, we state that Talibans are there to stay for a while in this country, and we will act based on this assumption. Thank you. And like I said before, we traditionally have trade relationship with Afghanistan, and this is yet another factor that would define our attitude towards the new regime. President Putin, what would be Russia's decision on acknowledgement and recognition of Taliban? Well, first of all, let us not forget that the United States brought troops to Afghanistan after the terror attack against the United States, after the terrible 9/11 terror attack. And the whole military operation was conducted under the aegida of combating terrorism. Now, the Taliban movement is de facto controlling all the territory of Afghanistan, with the exception of Panjshir and the adjacent territories in the north. But those are minor territories. Nonetheless, those are the adjacent territories bordering with Tajikistan. Today, Taliban is in control. If that is the case, then we should act based on the realities we have. And of course, I agree with the remark of the president of Kazakhstan and many other colleagues. I've discussed this issue with many counterparts lately. We need to analyze what stands behind the statements that the leadership of Taliban movement are making. But I'd like to draw your attention to the following fact. It's no coincidence that I've recalled the fact that the United States brought in the troops after the terrorist attacks on New York. The Taliban movement is not homogeneous, although mostly it is comprised of Pashto tribes, and I agree with my colleague from Kazakhstan. And on the territory of Afghanistan, there are many representatives of other organizations, including extreme organizations like Islamic State and others. Many were left free, many of the convicts were left free, and those are radicalized convicts. And I therefore have been thinking, Russia is not interested in disintegration of Afghanistan. If that happens, then there will be nobody to talk to negotiate with. And if that is the case, then we need to carefully think. The sooner the Taliban moves and joins the family of civilized peoples, the easier it would be to communicate and, in one way or another, influence the Taliban, to ask questions, if not to make demands, then at least to raise questions under the scope of those civilized relationships and encourage them to follow civilized rules, while in case of disintegration, there will be no counterpart to communicate to. And the Islamic movement of Uzbekistan is there, and many more. Terrorist movements, they are all there in Afghanistan at the moment, and all of it is a threat to our neighbors and our alliances. Bearing in mind that we do not have any visa restrictions and there is a freedom of movement across the borders, that is also of serious consequence for Russia in terms of security. So we need to unite our effort now. Together, we need to fight against those problems. I agree with the President of Kazakhstan. Together, we need to address the issue of legalization of the political forces in Afghanistan. We, of course, need to pay attention to what is happening in reality, but I guess we still need to unite our efforts. And when today I hear some high-ranking representatives of the United States stating that we are going to free the country and we're going to focus on our fight with China or Russia, I would like them to encourage, first and foremost, finalize the war they have been leading for 20 years, clear up the situation with your former enemy, and then make statements about contradiction to China and Russia. Why make that type of statements now? We need to unite our effort in order to combat terrorism. That was the initial idea of bringing American troops to Afghanistan. Combating drug trafficking, organized crime, those are shared threats for all of us. And so, since those are shared threats, we can only fight them together. Well, let me address the president of Mongolia. He is a lucky president in this regard. Mongolia is geographically further away from Afghanistan. But still, Mr. President, I'd like to ask you the following question. You're looking at this conflict from a side. Do you have enough security mechanisms in Asia? More or less, over the last 25 years, the dialogue has been happening in the ASEAN platform. Everybody was coming to the Shangri-La Hotel in Singapore, gathering up, having talks. Different countries were present there. Russia would go regularly, the United States as well. And now, after the collapse of Afghanistan, we're all facing new reality. But over the last 2 or 3 years, there were some attempts. ASEAN is no longer accurate. Maybe we should create some kind of Asian NATO analog. Those were the conversations we've been hearing, let's say the United States, Australia, and Japan. Well, sometimes it was called as an anti-Chinese movement, but here we have neutral Mongolia for centuries living between those two huge mechanisms, Russian mechanism and Chinese mechanism, that's how I would call them. And Mongolia, I know, has a statement, an address, the third neighbor. This is how you refer to all other neighbors. So, distinguished President of Mongolia, what is your take on the situation in Asia in terms of security? Well, globally speaking, Mongolia is both in Central Asia and Northeastern Asia, and being members of Northeastern Asia, we very carefully monitor security issues in our region. And we carefully monitor the situation evolving in the Asia-Pacific region. You've just stated that our country is safe and free from terrorism. We don't have any wars and we don't have terrorist threats. And we peacefully coexist with our two neighbors. Both with Russia and China, we have good relationship, we don't have any border issues, and we peacefully coexist with all of them. So we are ready to participate in negotiations on this issue. And we do believe that this issue should be resolved without application of power. As for Afghanistan, of course, we are concerned about the situation in the country. The United States and members of the coalition headed by the United States have taken a very fast, maybe too speedy decision that resulted in far-going consequences that very badly impact the situation in the region in general and the security situation in the region. Being a Central Asia country, we have had close relationship with Afghanistan. It dates back to the 13th century, all through the time of the Soviet Union. We've always enjoyed close relationship with Afghanistan, but lately our peacekeeping troops have been to this country. You know that. Today, Taliban is in control of the country, but domestic situation in the country remains very intense, both politically and economically. The country is in deep economic crisis at the moment. And of course, there are serious security threats, general threat to the well-being of population of this country. And of course, it cannot but impact the mindsets of those people. They directly face the issue of violence and abuse. And we therefore believe that that is a regional problem that deserves attention. And we are convinced that we need to continue our dialogue on that. Under the aegida of UN and other international organizations, we should address this issue. The forces that are in charge in the country at the moment will hopefully take a balanced and sensible decision. We hope that the country will remain integrated. It will not fall apart, but on the contrary, it will become a united and peaceful country. This is something that we very much wish for Afghanistan, and I guess other countries would also like to see a similar destiny for Afghanistan. Security and peaceful life of Afghanistan is something that the international community would very much wish for. Thank you. Thank you. Well, Ulaanbaatar looks like just a perfect Geneva for international cooperation. Why don't you have a meeting of the... Oh, apologies. Apologies, colleagues. As for the question of recognition of failure to recognize the government of Taliban, I'd like to add one more comment on that. I think that is a very important comment. Those are the two resolutions adopted by the Security Council of the United Nations, the one in 2003 and 2011. Under those resolutions, they have acknowledged this movement to be terroristic. So if we address the issue of recognition of Taliban movement, we would obviously and inevitably have to address those two resolutions. And in this regard, the role of the permanent members of the Security Council for Russia and China, the United States, France, and the UK would play a vital role. And I believe, once again, it brings us back to the platform of the United Nations, and that is very important. Well, thank you very much for your comment, Mr. President. We graduated from the same university. You probably remember we had a course of international relations and foreign policy. Well, the current state of recognition or non-recognition of Taliban reminds me very much of the negotiations between the UK, United States and the Soviet on the recognition of the government of Badolia back in 1944. Well, it should end in one way or another, but that's put aside. Please let me address the last issue for today. Believe me or not, I'm being partially paid for simply watching TV. And when I came to Vladivostok, I started watching local TV channels very carefully. Moscow 24, our channels, and also the news on Vesti 24 in Vladivostok. And I made a list of topics that I considered to be particularly curious. We talked a lot about the development of the Far East, we talked about industrial projects, but apart from that, in Magadan, I was just making notes of the few days that have been in Vladivostok. In Magadan, they're constructing a bridge very similar to one that we have in the park in Zaryadia in Moscow. Looks very pretty. In Khabarovsk, and here in the Ruski Island, they plan to prolong the skiing tracks, the skiing pista. At Kamchatka, a bird service center would be developed. Well, you probably know this issue before. We had a lot of poachers, and they were trying to steal the falcons and sell them over to the Arabian countries. Well, now in the country, we have 300 birds donated by Arabian colleagues, and they're going to create a sanctuary for falcons breeding. So that would be something very, very special. We managed to reverse the situation in this regard. But as for the latest news, that is the fact that Vladivostok is going to opt for hosting Olympic Games. Will you support this application?
You know, unfortunately, less and less candidates in the world to host the Olympic Games. It is a very costly event. It is connected with today's events, and unfortunately it is fraught with the pandemic and fight against infectious diseases. There are a lot of other elements as well. You have seen how the preparations went to host the Olympic Games. There were a lot of protests in Japan, including against holding the Olympic Games in that country, but we have always supported. And I hope that the principles of the Olympic Games will not be misrepresented or abused, that there will be no politicizing of them. If everything goes as I'm saying, that we do not rule out the possibility of hosting the Olympic Games in the Russian Federation, in the Far East, in Vladivostok. It is one of the possible platforms, but it is too early to say. We need to calculate it. Hosting major international political and sport events and competitions always contribute to the development of the region. Right now, we are at the within the Far Eastern Federal University. It was created while we were preparing for the APEC summit. We could have hosted it in Moscow or in St. Petersburg, where the platform is well developed. It would not take a lot of effort at all in order to hold such an event in those places. But I made the decision back there then to hold it here, and this is why this university and surrounded areas were created and developed in order to develop education, and I have no regrets. I believe that it was the right decision. We also built a new airport, a new railway, and a new road to connect the airport to the center of the city. And there were also many other objects and facilities built due to this event. It gave an impetus to the development of the Far East. If we see holding major sports events from this perspective, I believe that it will be another contribution to developing the region and the city. I do not rule it out, but the necessary conditions have to be created first for Russia to fully participate in major sports events. Russia has to have this opportunity, but it does not depend on us. I hope that such unifying platforms as art, sports, fighting against common challenges are enough to finally make everyone guide themselves by common interests and not by egotistical or politicized considerations. Distinguished participants of the Eastern Economic Forum, let us once again thank all those who made a video address, President of China, Prime Minister of India, Prime Minister of Thailand. We had with us the President of Kazakhstan and the head of Mongolia, President of Mongolia. Thank you for the host. Thank you to the host. I thank you, Mr. President. Traditionally, I would like to thank our moderator and everyone who has gathered here for coming to Vladivostok, for dedicating a lot of time to this event, for thinking about implementing projects in the Far East. And I hope that these plans and projects will be put into practice and be successful. From our side, the state will do everything in its power to make it possible. Thank you.